Is your reading an enlightened activity? Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome or welcome back to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I wanted to do another original book tag for you. So, about a month ago, I created an original book tag that was based on the Four Noble Truths. It was a celebration of the Buddhist holiday Wheel Turning Day, when the Buddha taught his first sermon. So that was the philosophy of reading book tag. And I had a lot of fun creating it, and I've seen a lot of good responses that were really encouraging. So I thought I'd make another one. And let me tell you, Buddhism, we love lists. There's always the 4 of this, the 6 of that, the 10 of that, the 110 of these. We love lists. So it's pretty easy to find a new list and to make a book tag around it. And I thought that would be a fun project. So the book tag I have for you today, I'm calling The Perfection of Reading, and it is based on the 6 perfections. So what are the 6 perfections? The 6 perfections are these 6 types of enlightened activity that are the purview of beings that are called bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are beings or people who live their lives totally dedicated to benefiting others, to removing the suffering of others. Everything they do is for the purpose of being of service to others. And those of us who are practicing Buddhism are encouraged to live our life as if we were a bodhisattva, to try to embody the activity and the mindset and the attitude of a bodhisattva. And one way we do that is by practicing these 6 perfections, or these 6 enlightened activities, the 6 pāramitās, they're called in Sanskrit. And what are those 6 perfections? They are the perfection of generosity, the perfection of morality or ethical discipline, the perfection of patience, the perfection of joyful effort or perseverance, the perfection of concentration, and the perfection of wisdom. So what I've done is I've created 6 prompts, one to go with each of those, and I encourage everyone to not only answer the prompt, but then also offer a book that they think embodies that particular perfection for them. And now, within Buddhism and Buddhist epistemology, we have very specific definitions of what those 6 kind of activities mean. Don't worry about that, whatever that means for you. So whatever generosity means for you, what is a book that embodies that for you, and so on. So that is the second part of each prompt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all 6 of the prompts, and then I'll go back and I'll give my answers to all 6. The perfection of reading book tag. 1. The perfection of generosity. What is an experience of either book gifting or book receiving that was meaningful or memorable for you? 2. The perfection of ethical discipline. What are your best and your worst reading habits? 3. The perfection of patience. What is a book that you anxiously waited for, and when you finally got a chance to read it, did it live up to the expectations that you had set for it? 4. The perfection of joyful effort. What is a book or a series that you found difficult to complete for whatever reason, and was it ultimately worthwhile when you did finish it? 5. The perfection of concentration. What do you do, if anything, to get yourself into a reading zone? What is your ideal reading environment? And 6. The perfection of wisdom. What is a book where after reading it you learn something, especially something that you didn't expect to get out of that book, whether it's something profound or something mundane? And of course, there is no prompt to tag others, but please do and share this prompt with others. Okay, having listed off all the prompts, now let me go through and give my answers to the prompts. So number 1, the perfection of generosity. What is an experience of either book gifting or book receiving that was meaningful or memorable to you? I'm going to have to say, just recently, this past summer, for my sister's birthday, I bought her the whole Murderbot series by Martha Wells. And so that's 6 novellas and a novel. And, I knew she would enjoy it, but I wasn't quite sure how much she'd enjoy it, and she loved it. She went through all, 7 books, in the span of maybe 2 weeks. And not only that, she then encouraged her coworkers to read those books as well, and she started lending her copies of the books to coworkers that she thought would enjoy them. And so for me, that was a really wonderful moment where I was trying to think of what to get her for her birthday, and I get books for everyone. All of my nephews and nieces and my siblings and anyone in my life who I get presents for, I'm likely going to get you a book. But it's kind of hit or miss. And I know my sister's taste, and I thought she'd like this, but I knocked it out of the park. So that was a really wonderful gifting experience that I recently had. And then a book that I am going to suggest embodies the idea of generosity is a little bit of a strange pick, but this is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is a type of autofiction, a kind of fictionalized memoir, and it is written as a series of letters to the narrator's mother, narrating his life. But the heartbreaking part of this format is that his mother doesn't speak English. And so in order to share the most intimate parts of himself with the person who is most meaningful in his life, he can only do it in a way that she'll never actually be able to receive it, which is itself like a heartbreaking idea. And for me, this embodies generosity just because he gives so much of himself to the page and to the reader. And granted, it's fictionalized. This isn't the author's real life, though it is based on events in his real life. But even just as a fictional narrator, never mind that this is autofiction. Never mind that. Just as a fictional narrator, he bears so much of himself and he just gives it freely to the audience reading it that you feel involved in this character's life and in his growing up and all of his struggles. And it's a really, really beautiful, poetic book. A little bit heartbreaking at times, but in the best of ways. So for me, that embodies this idea of generosity, is giving of yourself to others. Number 2, the perfection of ethical discipline. What are your best and your worst reading habits? Well, I'll say my best reading habit is that I'm really good at going with the flow and, readjusting my TBR or my reading plans on the fly whenever new things come up. And, if I get offered a buddy read with someone, I'm usually able to kind of pivot on a dime and jump into that buddy read. And so I'm able to be very flexible in how I read and still find meaning and joy and fun in, my often nebulous TBR. So that, my ability to adjust to the chaos of everyday life is perhaps one of my best reading habits. One of my worst reading habits, I'll say, is that I keep one more chaptering over and over and over again. And all of a sudden it's 3 a.m. Like I have a hard time once I'm into a book really stopping and putting it down. If I have a place to go and I have like a hard deadline, then I can stop and put it away. But if I'm just like, looking at a night's sleep ahead of me or something like that, it's very easy for me to get lost in a book and lose hours and hours and hours. And I have to get a little bit better with like etiquette around managing my time sometimes. So that is maybe my worst habit. And then a book that embodies morality or ethical discipline. For me, I'm going to choose The Gunslinger, which is the first book in the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. And, Roland, the titular gunslinger, he has a code of ethics that he lives by. And I certainly don't agree with his code of ethics all the time. Some of his behavior seems wild, but he lives by this very strict code of ethics. And everything about his life revolves around this code of ethics. So for me, I think that is a beautiful encapsulation of the idea of morality, even if it isn't a personal morality that I, ascribe to. Number 3, the perfection of patience. What is a book that you anxiously waited for, and did it live up to the expectations that you set for it? So for this, I'm going to choose You Were Never Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. This is Andrew Joseph White's first adult novel. He's written 3 young adult novels, and I loved all of them. I've read each of them multiple times. And then when this was announced, I was very excited for it. And I was wondering what an adult novel by him would look like, because his young adult novels are so kind of graphic and intense and almost adult feeling. And I wasn't let down by it at all. I loved it. I have a review for it coming out pretty soon. It's actually not being published until the beginning of September, so a little bit after this video is being released. And so I have a review for it coming out in line with the release date. But it was really dark, really emotional, and it did everything I had hoped it would do. And it hit me like in all the right places. So that is the book I choose for that. And what is a book that embodies the idea of patience? So I'm going to choose The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a horror novel. It is a piece of historical fiction, and it has to do with the frontier life and the infiltration of white people to the West taking over Native American land. And it's written in an epistolary style, and one of the characters is a Blackfeet Indian, and he, has awful things happen to him, and the amount of patience and discipline that he embodies in order to execute his plans of revenge, I think are really, incredible. If they span the whole scope of the novel. Now, again, I don't think that is a good use of patience. That's not what we mean by patience in the Buddhist sense of the word. But as someone who is able to plot his life out and look at the big picture and always be incrementally moving towards his goal, embodies a type of at least the worldly understanding of the word patience that I think is really interesting to see, and it's a phenomenal book as well. Okay, number 4. The Perfection of Joyful Perseverance. What is a book or series that you found difficult to complete, but you found ultimately to be worthwhile? And so I'm going to say The Realm of the Elderling series by Robin Hobb. I haven't even completed it yet. It's 16 books long, and I finished 8 books. So in terms of book count, I'm halfway through. I think I'm maybe more than halfway through in terms of page count, but I'm halfway through in terms of book count. And I'm only finding it difficult because a lot of the books are quite big. A lot of the books are 900 pages or more, and there are 16 of them in this series. So it's just a big time commitment to every individual book, never mind the whole series. And so that is why it is difficult to complete. Yet I will say it is very worthwhile. I have enjoyed every one of the books I've read so far, and they're very immersive, and And Robin Hobb shows off different writing styles and different approaches to narrative in ways across the books that make each book stand out on its own. So I'm really loving the series. I haven't even completed it yet, but that is what I'm going to answer for this one. And then a book that I think embodies the idea of joyful perseverance or joyful effort is going to be The City in Glass by Ni Vo. This is a novella, and the premise of it is this demon is the patron of this city. And the city is destroyed by angels for no real reason, or none that you know of. And she had been slowly working in the city for hundreds and hundreds of years, building up the city to make the city a place of scholarship and of trade and like a thriving community. And then out of the blue, these angels just come and destroy it. And what does she do? She decides to rebuild, to reclaim her city. There's nothing but rubble. And year after year after year, decade after decade after decade, century after century, she slowly builds it back up into a new city. And just the idea of looking at this destruction that is facing her and the end of all this work that she has been doing for her whole, for hundreds of years. And then deciding, instead of giving into despair, saying, okay, I'm going to do it again, and just slowly, meticulously making a plan to rebuild and create a new city, I think is a really beautiful exploration of, what it means to look at destruction and despair and choose to look away from it instead. Number 5, the perfection of concentration. What do you do, if anything, to get into a reading zone? And what is your ideal reading environment? I have to say, I'm pretty lucky that I can read anywhere and everywhere. And I do, whether it is in a car or on a bus, or whether it is standing on the metro, or more ideally, here at home and comfortable. When I lived in the States, I had a nice big recliner, and that would be my favorite position for reading, for books, for movies, anything. I really appreciated a good recliner. I don't have that here, so most of my reading is done either sitting here at my desk, reclining a little bit in my desk chair, or laying on my bed, depending on how tired I am and what time of day it is. So that is usually where I go for physical environment. And then mental environment, there's always things going on at the monastery. There's very rarely peace and quiet. It's not that kind of monastery. Tibetan monasteries are not that kind of monastery. So I'm good at just getting into a zone and then picking up a book, reading a few pages, and blocking out everything around me. Ideally, I like to have more than a few minute chunks. Like I'd prefer not to pick it up and put it down, pick it up and put it down. I like to have a little bit of time to really fall into a story. But if I don't, then, I can make do usually with whatever I got. This is Editor Lecton jumping in. I realized that I did not include a selection for a book that embodies the idea of concentration. And so for this, I'm going to choose The Unworthy by Agustina Bazterrica. This takes place in a kind of near future that is a post-apocalyptic landscape, and our whole story takes place in a single convent. And it is in another epistolary story. It is a collection of journal entries from our main character, who goes unnamed throughout the whole course of the novel. And one of the really interesting things about being inside her mind is that she is afraid of writing these things down, of remembering the things that she's remembering. So there are parts of the book that are struck out that she must have recorded in this journal, and then she wanted to unrecord them if possible. And so the story is looking at this idea of the occult and of faith and of cults, and how that intersects with the idea of personal autonomy and what it means for autonomy and your right to live and your wish to live a meaningful life to be in opposition to this idea of the community of religious order, right? Or religious belief, especially how those two intersect at a time of great turmoil or upheaval, such as this post-apocalyptic time when the earth has been poisoned and so forth. And so this clash, right, between what it means to be an individual and what it means to know what your desires are, what you want, what you need in order to lead a fulfilling life, how to learn those things about yourself when you are in a space that is actively suppressing them, I think is a really engaging exercise. And so the reason it embodies concentration for me is because she spends so much time in her own mind, really analyzing her mind, her wants, her desires, her needs, her situation. And before she goes about taking any steps or making any action outwardly, she does a whole lot of inner work in order to have some confidence that the direction she's pointing is the one that she wants to go, especially when it is not the direction that everyone else in the community is pointing in. And last, number 6, The Perfection of Wisdom. What is a book where you learn something, especially something that was unexpected, and whether profound or mundane? So for this, I'm going to choose a recent book I read called Rake's Fall by Vajra Chandrasekhara. He's a Sri Lankan author, and this is like a science fiction / speculative book about a pair of people who keep reincarnating over and over and over again. And the story is more of a vibes story. The narrative is very loose, but it starts, in prehistory times and goes into the far future. And reading it, something I learned that I hadn't thought about was the institution of slavery in Sri Lanka, which I guess had never really thought about. I've known a little bit about Sri Lanka. I visited Sri Lanka once And I guess I never really thought about the institution of slavery there. There are multiple institutions of slavery. Historically, there was an institution of slavery within the native indigenous peoples there, both the Sinhala and the Tamil. And then also around the 16th century, the Portuguese traders brought their own slaves that they used in part of their wars against the Sinhala kings. And so there's multiple institutions of slavery that existed on this very small island off the coast of India that I just hadn't thought about before. And so it kind of, when I read about it in this book, it put me down a rabbit hole of looking up other books and other articles about it. And it was just really interesting to read how multiple institutions of slavery existed and overlapped. And it didn't really end until the British came in the 19th century as part of their colonial project. And the Global Slavery Index actually still says that I think 6.5 people out of 1,000 are in conditions that they consider to be conditions of enslavement in Sri Lanka as of 2021. And so it just got me down a rabbit hole thinking, and also got me thinking about slavery in America, because as long-standing as slavery in Sri Lanka was, it was never chattel slavery. And there's something unique about the American experience where chattel slavery became the de facto norm. And slavery across the board is awful. And I don't think there's any I have no interest in denying that. But chattel slavery is something entirely different that seems to go even farther than many other institutions of slavery. And it just got me thinking a lot and what it is about the kind of historical American spirit that led to this barbaric, evil institution. And so that all came from reading a book that I didn't expect to think about any of those things. So that is one thing I learned. And then a book that I think embodies wisdom. I guess I can't get out of this without giving a Buddhist recommendation. So I'm going to recommend the Bodhicharyavatara, which is translated as The Way of the Bodhisattva. This is a book by Shantideva. Shantideva is an 8th century Indian scholar, and it's one of the most famous books for Mahayana Buddhism and teaching or exploring the six perfections especially. There are many different translations of it into English. The two that I've read, one is titled The Way of the Bodhisattva, and this is translated by the Padmakara Translation Group. And the other one is A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. It's translated by B. Alan Wallace. Both of them are good. I haven't compared them word by word or line by line. I think Alan Wallace's translation is more accurate, quote unquote. He also is translating from the Tibetan as well as the Sanskrit, and he's comparing them against each other, whereas the Padmakara Translation Group is only translating from the Tibetan. I think Alan Wallace's is more accurate, but for me, the Padmakara translation, it is more pleasant to read and a little less academic feeling. So it's give and take. You know, they're both good translations though. And then there are also quite a number of commentaries on the Bodhicharyavatara. So one of them is by His Holiness Dalai Lama, and that's called For the Benefit of All Beings, a commentary on the way of the Bodhisattva. Another one that's translated into English is called The Nectar of Manjushri's Speech, and this is by Kunzan Pelton. And then a last one I recommend is called Shantideva's Guide to Awakening, a commentary on the Bodhicharyavatara. This is by Geshe Tupten. But those are all commentaries of different styles, all on that ancient Indian text, which is, you know, a cornerstone for Mahayana Buddhist thought. So that's it. Those are my answers to the 6 prompts, as well as 6 book recommendations to go with the 6 prompts. I hope everyone enjoys this book tag as much as I have. I thought it was a fun thing to create, and I'm going to tag a bunch of other people, and all that will be down in the description. If you're watching this, consider yourself tagged, even if you aren't officially tagged. I'd love to hear your responses to this, either in the comments below or make your own video, and please share it, and definitely tag me in your shared video so I have a chance to see it as well. But for now, I'll say thank you for spending some time with me today. I appreciate you. Please be kind to yourselves, take care of each other, and go slowly.